Hey everybody! So now we're looking at an important question, which is why did sexual reproduction actually evolve in different species? So remember, we've learnt about the differences between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction, and it seems like asexual reproduction is easier overall. So that's the focus of this video. Why did sexual reproduction evolve? So if you think about asexual reproduction, where an individual can just copy itself, or it can just make lots and lots of cells that then grow into copies of itself, that seems much easier than having to go out and find a mate and have to spend all the energy on doing sexual reproduction. But the fact is that sexual reproduction has evolved, and the key reason for that is all about variation. So remember that variation means how different are the individuals in a population of a particular species. So here's a few populations here. We've got some ladybirds, and in this population we can see there's variation in their colour. In the colour of their protective wing casings. We've got a few that are orange with black spots, and then a few that are black with orange spots. We can also see variations clearly in humans. We know there's a lot of variation in skin tone among the human species. And actually in humans too, there's variation in who can drink milk and who can't as an adult, which is called lactose tolerance. So these are a few examples, but there's thousands of examples of variations in lots of different traits in every single species. And the reason why that's so important is because if a population is living in an environment and that environment changes, then that population has a much better chance of surviving and evolving and responding to those changes. As opposed to if that population was all exactly the same, if that population had just been cloning itself from asexual reproduction, they might not be able to survive the changes in the environment. So, variation it makes populations and species in general more resilient to changes in the environment. And this is actually the first step in leading towards how evolution happens, which we'll cover in our next topic. But it's good to think about here too. So thinking about our populations here, different ladybugs, that variation is going to help them if their predators find ladybugs based on sight, because some of the ladybugs will be easier to find than others. So the colour is going to affect predators' choices on which ladybugs they eat. In humans, skin tone, well, that affects how susceptible we are to getting skin cancer. So that's why skin tone varies depending on the amount of sunlight and UV in that environment. So skin cancers. And lactose tolerance, well, that variation has actually been important when we developed milk as a commercial product or an agricultural product in humans, because most humans couldn't actually drink milk as adults, but because a few adults could, when we started to domesticate cows, that helped a small group of humans be able to drink milk, and that gave them a big advantage in that environment. So that today, most people in the Western world are lactose tolerant as an adult. So that helped because they were able to drink milk and gain lots of nutrition in a pretty easy to farm, it's an easy to farm product. So able to drink milk, if I could actually spell. All right. So variation is the key. Sexual reproduction causes variation, and variation helps populations to survive. The next question, though, is how does sexual reproduction cause that variation? How does sexual reproduction cause variation? And there's two main reasons we'll look at here. The first one is the fact that in meiosis, each gamete that gets produced from meiosis, it has a random half, or a random 50% of the chromosomes. Gametes have a random 50% of chromosomes from the parent cell. And that's what this first diagram here is showing. So let's just look at an example of a species that only has 2 chromosomes. So the big chromosome here is chromosome 1, and then the small chromosome here is chromosome 2. So in this particular species, when it's going through meiosis to make some gametes, the key stage, remember, in meiosis is metaphase 1. So when the pairs of chromosomes, and we call them homologous chromosomes, identical, when the homologous chromosomes line up in pairs, they pair up randomly. So one possible way the chromosomes could pair up is shown here in number 1. We could have the blue one first for chromosome 1 and the blue one first for chromosome 2. And then when meiosis completes, that's going to give us these possible genotypes in the 2 types of gametes. We could have the 2 dominant alleles and the 2 recessive alleles in the 2 different gametes. But there's another way that the chromosomes could line up in metaphase 1. So the other possibility is if the blue chromosome's first for chromosome 1, but then in chromosome 2, the red chromosome might line up first, or on the left. So in that case, when meiosis completes, the gametes that are produced here, you can see this gamete's actually going to have a big A and a small b, and then the other one has a small a and a big B. So there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 possible gametes that can be made here. And then when those gametes are free to go off and combine during fertilization to make a child or a new offspring. So here, this is only an individual species with 2 chromosomes, and there's 4 possible types of gametes. But for humans, we've got 23 types of chromosomes. And the maths there is, if there's 2 possible ways to line up the chromosomes, and there's only 2 chromosomes. That gives us 4 options. But for humans, we've got 23 different chromosomes. And that's over 8 million possible combinations. Of gametes that can be made. So that's the first way variation can happen. That at the very start of making gametes, humans can make at least 8 million different gametes that can then go on and combine. And that is the second point. So the other way that variation happens is once those gametes have been made, then they combine with another gamete from another person, which makes a brand new person that has a different combination of alleles again. So we can say that half the mother's genes, or alleles, combine with half the father's. So that's what this diagram here is showing. So the mother's going to have a whole lot of particular alleles in her genome. The father's got particular alleles in his genome. And then a random 50% of those, as we explained above, is going to be put into gametes and then combined together during fertilization to make a new combination of alleles again. So there's millions and millions of possible combinations of genes that we can have, and that's why no 2 people and no 2 individuals are ever the same. Okay. So sexual reproduction is important because it causes variation, and variation occurs because gametes have a random 50% of chromosomes, and then they combine with another gamete to make a random combination again.